Good evening, everyone. We're going to call tonight's meeting to order. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Allen?
Present.
Mrs. Bowman?
Here.
Ms. Boyle?
These are too loud.
Mrs. Hallenbeck?
Present.
Mr. Kovitz?
Here.
Mr. Marrington? Here. Mr. Parentano?
Present.
Mr. Cirillo?
Here.
And Mr. Sullivan?
Present.
Thank you. Could everybody stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Tonight's meeting is being held today, December 2nd, 7 p.m. in the Maple Point Auditorium for the purposes of an Act 34 hearing for the proposed new Maple Point Elementary School. Before we start the hearing, I have an opening statement that we're going to read into the record. I'd like to start off by giving you a brief explanation as to the purpose of the Act 34 hearing. An Act 34 hearing is required by the provisions of Section 7-701.1 of the School Code. It is applicable when the school district desires to construct a new building or substantially renovate or enlarge an existing building. It requires that the school districts conduct a public hearing at least 30 days prior to submitting its initial building cost estimates to the Department of Education. If the maximum building construction costs, as defined in the Act, exceed the aggregate building construction standard, which is the standard that the PDE establishes as the reasonable building construction costs, then the costs need to be approved by referendum. If, however, the costs do not exceed that standard, which is the case here in the Chamonix School District, then the district has met its burden under the Act 34 by conducting a public hearing. If after final costs are determined, it is found that the costs exceed the aggregate building expenditure standard, approval must be obtained from the voters within 6 months, but prior to the submission of the final building costs to the PDE. If the final bids to be submitted to the PDE are less than the standard, but higher than the 8% of the initial estimate, then a subsequent public hearing must be conducted. Please understand that the costs which are the subject of this discussion do not include land acquisition costs, site development costs, utility costs to the site, and/or professional costs related to the project. As previously mentioned, this hearing will follow very closely with the booklet identified as Exhibit 1, which will be made part of the record. The testimony given will be highlights of various aspects of this exhibit, since the testimony is summarized within the context of the Act 34 hearing booklet. In addition, I want the public to understand that this is not a public board meeting or a committee meeting where there will be a back and forth dialogue between the board and the audience. This is an official legal hearing required by Pennsylvania School Code, as represented by the fact we are required to have a legal stenographer in attendance. No board vote will be taken this evening. As previously stated, this is a mandatory public hearing for the purposes outlined and to inform the public of the financial aspects of the proposed project. Lastly, I wish to note that this is not the first time the board has communicated or invited the public to participate in discussion of this proposed project. Over the last year and a half, the board has sponsored several committee meetings, advertised and open to the public for discussion, as well as board members have spoken about the project during public board meetings, along with newspaper articles in the Bucks County Courier-Times outlining the new elementary school project. At the conclusion of the testimony, the public in attendance will be granted an opportunity for public comment and testimony. And that concludes my opening remarks. Mr. Solicitor?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Piratano. At this point, I will set forth the
documentation and exhibits for the hearing. Exhibit 1 is the resolution dated October 26, 2021, establishing the new Maple Point Elementary School project with a maximum project cost of $43,364,152 and a maximum building construction cost of $34,621,642, along with fixing the Act 34 hearing date and directing the preparation and distribution of the project description booklet. Exhibit 2 is the Act 34 hearing booklet. Exhibit 3 is the revised Act 34 hearing booklet, which does include a signed copy of the board resolution previously marked at Exhibit 1 at page 32. Exhibit 4 is the Bucks County Courier-Times proof of publication, Exhibit 4 is the Act 34 requirement that the Bucks County Courier-Times be provided of a copy of the Act 34 booklet. I can say that on November 8th of 2021, the booklet was mailed by my office to the Courier-Times, and Exhibit 4 is the notice with an attached certificate of mailing and FedEx delivery confirmation, also dated November 9th, 2021. Exhibit 5 is the Bucks County Courier-Times proof of publication dated November 7th, 2021 for tonight's hearing. Exhibit 6 is the affidavit by Dr. McGee for posting of notice for the hearing held tonight, December 2nd, 2021 at the administrative offices here at Maple Point. Exhibit 7 is the affidavit from Dr. McGee for posting of the notice of hearing on the auditorium door here at Maple Point Middle School for tonight's hearing, together with the posting at the auditorium. Exhibit 8 is a letter, November 17th, 2021, to the Courier-Times, providing the supplement page 32 that I previously mentioned, which is a signed resolution. Exhibit 9, which is the last exhibit, is the affidavit from Dr. McGee for the availability of the Act 34 booklet from November 11th, 2021 through tonight's hearing, December 2nd, 2021. Those are all the exhibits I have. Just to supplement Mr. Piratano's statement, I'd like to make an announcement that the residents and taxpayers of the school district have through and including January 3rd, 2022 to submit to the school district written testimony regarding this project as described in the Act 34 booklet. At this point, a point of information, I would like to point out that tonight's hearing, as Mr. Piratano had indicated, is not a scheduled board meeting. There will be no action taken by the board this evening. This is an opportunity for the public to be informed about the project and for members of the public to provide their comments to the school district on this project, and that there will be no dialogue. The board is sitting here presiding over a hearing. As I said, this is not a meeting, and again, there'll be no dialogue between the members and or others. That finishes up what I have to say, Mr. Piratano, but I would like to, I guess at this point, move on to the witnesses. There'll be 3 witnesses: Dr. McGee, Scott Downey from Spiesel Architectural Group, and Zach Williard. I guess at this point, if all 3 of you could stand so Michelle could swear you in. Okay, so at this point, Dr. McGee, you're the first witness. So project history and need for construction.
Thank you, Mr. Tarente. Chamonix has a long project history. We've been to Chamonix since the 1950s and been on this in this area since 50-plus years beyond that as Langhorne, Middletown, and 5 other school districts. But most recently, over the past decade or so, our footprint was 10 elementary schools, 4 middle schools, and 1 high school. And over that time, we have consolidated because our enrollment has decreased and our facilities were getting old. So presently, we sit at 6 elementary schools, 3 middle schools, and 1 high school. Once we got to that size, we began moving around the district, improving our facilities as far as HVAC, windows, doors, etc., to make sure that they were up to standards. Our most recent pass began or finished up about 5 years ago in Lower Southampton Township, where we evaluated our schools in that area, determined that the best solution was to decommission schools and build the Tawanka Elementary School. We now are moving to the center of the school district, and hopefully in the future we'll move to the Levittown side to do the same thing. So in our present state, the center of the school district lacks an elementary school at this end. And our oldest elementary school in this area is Pearl S. Buck Elementary School. It was built in 1968 and has not received significant renovations since that time. So in evaluating our options, one of the simplest options is just to get it up to speed as far as the physical plant. And our professionals have told us to bring Pearl S. Buck Elementary School up to quality in the physical plant sense. It would take between $12 and $13 million. Then you take a look at that, what an educational structure do you need? And in addition, though we've downsized, our population is now beginning to go the other direction, particularly at this end of the district. So not only we need a little bit more space. So to bring Buck up to one, educational standards, and to add that extra space, another $12 to $13 million, say those who cost those things out. So that's a $25, $26, $27 million renovation project that would have taken 3 years while our kindergarten to fourth graders go to school there. That is balanced against the option of building a new facility on a lot that's not being used and doesn't interrupt anyone, that's coming in somewhere above $40 million. So the board has chosen to go with that direction and move the new facility and not interrupt the education of those at Buck as we build that facility. So that's what got us here. Our hope, the next step is once this is complete and we're financially able to do it, we move to Levittown and evaluate those schools there, go through the same process. What does it cost to bring it up to speed physically, educationally, size-wise, and compare that to a potential new structure. At that point, we'll have completed this pass around the district. Mr. Parentano, or I'm sorry, Mr. Trente.
Thank you, Dr. McGee. In addition to your testimony related to the estimated construction costs that are stated for the record, those construction costs were estimates that were done over a year ago.
That is correct. That is correct.
So we would incur additional costs, I assume, just due to inflation, and I additionally believe that there was analysis, I don't believe he spoke about on the record, of how the demographics has changed and how there's a belief that new bus routes will greatly improve some of the traffic issues with taking everybody from the north and taking them all the way down on the other side of Route 1.
So Mr. Parentano is correct by moving this structure, or moving the Buck structure, decommissioning the Buck building and moving it to this location. It changes geographically the transportation where closer to most where the families that go to the school are. So it does cut down the busing routes, correct.
Mr. Solicitor?
Okay, thank you, Dr. McGee and Mr. Piratano. Just following the Act 34 booklet up next, as far as witnesses, Scott Downey, who will be covering the project options considered and a project description. I believe there's a PowerPoint presentation. Scott is from Spiesel Architectural Group. He's the district's architect hired for this project. So with that, Mr. Downey.
Oops. Good evening. Just to hit the highlights of project need, the information we're presenting here can be found in the booklet starting on page 7. The project is proposed as a new kindergarten through 4th grade elementary school to be built on the site of the existing Maple Point Middle School. a two-story facility of approximately 115,000 square feet in size, designed to support 800 or slightly more students. The school is proposed as a replacement school for Pearl S. Buck, which is inefficient to operate due to its smaller size and the extensive physical upgrades that would be required to renew and upgrade the building system for continued operation. The building is also a challenge to expand because of its circular classroom wings and the building's configuration and site. The new elementary school will be more energy efficient, will provide a range of modern educational space, and will share site resources with Maple Point Middle School. Again, in the Act 34 booklet appearing on page 8, you have projections. These projections are available publicly. They are generated by the Pennsylvania Department of Education. They are standard cohort survival enrollment projections. Those are represented on pages 8 and 9. The district hired its own demographer to do a more extensive study of demographics and enrollment projections that considered other factors in the district, such as housing development and other factors. This study contained enrollment projections that were based on two scenarios. These two models utilized enrollment data from the last school year, the school year that was impacted primarily by COVID related impacts, and treated that enrollment in two different ways. One, it treated it by considering it equal weight of all data years, and two, Model 2 considered the current COVID-19 impact year with a reduced weighting due to the impacts from COVID in that school year. These enrollment projections as generated are shown in the booklet on page 10. The 5-year projection from the demographer was for an increase in students from just over 9,100 students to just over 9,600 students over the course of that 5 years. A series of options were considered when this project was explored by the Board of Education, 3 of which are highlighted up here on the screen. The first was what we refer to as a baseline assessment. This looked at what the minimum necessary to maintain the operation of the schools might be and did not consider new construction or educational space upgrades. Scenario 2 focused on the possible expansion and renovation of the Pearl S. Buck Elementary School. That option considered focused renovation and expansion efforts within the district on that school, and considered renovations and upgrades at other schools, but no other expansion within the district. Scenario 3 considered the replacement of the Pearl S. Buck Elementary School. This option focused on all the construction on a new elementary school to replace Pearl Buck Elementary School, and considered renovations and upgrades at the other schools, but no other expansion within the district. Ultimately, Scenario 3 is the option being presented here tonight and the option chosen to be forwarded by the Board of Education. So I'm going to take you through briefly a site plan and the building plans. These also appear in the Act 34 booklet. The site plan appears on page 17. So this structure is the existing Maple Point Middle School. Woodburn Road entrance is here, and the new elementary school would be to the side of the existing middle school. So traffic would come into the site, would proceed in this direction, wrap around, and exit for visitors and drop off. Bus traffic would be separated and would loop around the back of the school as it's laid out here. The floor plans start on page 18, and to take you briefly through those, the entrance to the school would be at the lower right-hand side of the screen. This would be the main entrance for visitors, and the office is located right here, with the nurses area right here, number 7. The second entrance to the school at the back side would be for bus drop-off for the students coming from the bus drive, which would be located at the top of the plan. To the right of the entrance, you would have in Area 5, the library or media center, the art room, identified as 8, and 2 music rooms identified as 9 to the right. Up above that, you have a gymnasium, a stage, and a dining area and kitchen. The stage is designed within the school to function from either, or be used with either the cafeteria, dining area, or the gym to the right. This is mechanical space labeled number 13 to the right-hand side of the plan. There are a series of educational pods specifically 5, 2 of which occur on the first floor. This would be for early childhood students. Each pod consists of a series of classrooms labeled 1. There are 8 of those rooms in each pod. There are also 2 classrooms, which are breakout areas, open classroom spaces, and flexible education spaces in the center of each pod. There is a small group room here that can be divided into 2 smaller rooms, labeled number 2. Number 3 is also a small group room, and number 14 is a faculty support space. Similar spaces can be found in each of the other pods. So here you see 1, the classrooms, you see the small group rooms here, and the faculty space, the open classrooms are located here. On the second floor of the building, you actually have 3 educational pods, 1 here, 1 here, and 1 here. Each pod has similar spaces as the other 2 that we just walked through, including 8 classrooms, a mixture of small group and alternative education spaces, a mixture of open classrooms that can be used flexibly for breakout, and different types of educational activities. The spaces shown at the top, the dining, the stage, and the gym, are simply large volume 2-story spaces that you would access on the first floor. And with that, I will turn it over to, well, I'll return it to Mr. Tarente.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Downey. At this point, on to the analysis of the financial alternatives. Zachary Williard of PFM Financial Advisors, LLC. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, again, so I'm Zach Williard from PFM Financial Advisors. We're the district's independent financial advisor, and as our role is to evaluate the best financing method to fund the project. So what we did was we looked at the 4 main methods that are available: a cash or short-term loan, a general obligation bond issue, a local authority issue, and a financing through the State Public School Building Authority. Now, given the size of the project, short-term loan or cash is not really feasible. So what we did was we took the other 3 alternatives and we ran a detailed financing analysis to see what would result in the lowest debt service payment on an annual basis for the project. And what we determined was a general obligation bond issue will be the cheapest cost of financing for the upcoming project. So on this page, you can see the analysis that was run. We're also going to look at a number of different ways to help minimize the payment. The first one would be that we will probably not need to use bond insurance for the bond issue because of the school district's high credit rating. We're also going to take a look at a wraparound debt service structure on the 2022 bonds to minimize the millage impact because the district does have a debt drop-off out in the future. Number 3, the school district is going to consider the use of cash in the approximate amount of $13,356,914 to fund the project and to minimize how much money actually needs to be borrowed. So all these different things will be used, again, to help minimize the project before we go to market. Now, because there's a plan-con moratorium, the school district is not anticipating any plan-con or state reimbursement for the project, so all of the numbers that we show and all of the budget estimates assume that there will be no state reimbursement on the upcoming project. As a result of the project, there is expected to be additional indirect costs associated with additional insurance for the building, estimated in the amount of $50,000. So assuming collected mill currently provides $775,000, the indirect costs will have a millage equivalent of approximately 0.06 mils annually. The total millage equivalent of the project, based on the borrowing of $30 million, is expected to be 1.43 mils. So when you combine the indirect costs and the total millage equivalent of the project, we expect the total project millage equivalent to equal 1.49 mils. And with that, I'll turn it back over to your solicitor.
Thank you, Zach. At this point in the hearing, we could begin taking public comment. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes per person. The board secretary will call the names of the persons who have pre-registered to speak. When we are concluded with that list, those present who have not signed up may speak, as the advertisement specifically provides that they be permitted to do so. We should begin with the list of people who have pre-registered to speak. I would like to note that the time for each statement, again, will be limited to 3 minutes. You should state your name and the area where you reside. Mrs. Burns?
Pam Jakubik.
Hi, thanks for letting me speak. My name is Pam Jakubik. I'm a lifelong Neshaminy resident. I live right across the street. The crosswalk to this school is my house. So I see a lot of traffic things. I am absolutely against this project, but not for the reasons you might think. My biggest concern is safety. As a nurse, my whole thing has always been safety. I watch these little kids cross the street. People fly around the crossing guard 60 miles an hour. What I am coming to tell you is I implore you to work with other agencies to assure that these children are safe. They're not going to be safe. PennDOT's going to fix the intersection at Langhorne Yardley Road and Woodburn Road. It's going to widen this road right all the way up to my house. People are going to speed even faster than 60 miles an hour. It's not going to be safe for the kids crossing the road. The other thing is, I don't know if you're aware of it, the Delaware River Joint Bridge Commission, whatever their big long name is building a site for all of their dump trucks, their speeding dump trucks right across from Steyer's. As soon as Big Oak Road has a big pothole, guaranteed they're going to go Woodburn Road, Langhorne Yardley Road to get to where they need to go. And the kids are not going to be safe. I have talked to the township about it. I have talked to the state about it. They will not reduce the speed limit here, and it's going to get worse. So I implore you to talk to these other agencies to make sure whatever kids are crossing over, all these little babies, the elementary school kids, are going to be safe getting over here once you build this school. And the other thing I'm concerned about is what's going to happen at Pearl Buck. What's the life going to be for the Twin Oaks kids, families there? How are you going to guarantee that when you sell that building or that land, that it's not going to be resold to somebody that's going to increase traffic, increase congestion, all of that for them? All right, thank you.
Mark Shubin.
Hi. Good evening. Mark Shubin, Sales Executive, Highland Gate. So I'm speaking in support of this great project, as also a former board member who's been involved in this, what I consider what we have called the roadmap. And the reason the roadmap was so successful to date is because we always thought about putting an elementary school eventually here in this location. It just makes tremendous sense for a number of reasons. First and foremost, we've already seen what happens when we don't build new and we try to revitalize an old building that's been in rough shape. And what occurs is we just continue to pour money into those buildings, and it becomes very much a diminishing return. When we build new, we can take advantage of all the efficiencies and modern capabilities of the buildings from an HVAC perspective, from an environmental perspective, and also build a facility that maximizes the usage for our students with the most modern and up-to-date equipment. So this is the absolute right thing to do, because based on these choices here, everything else is really just sinking money into old buildings to fix holes that eventually we're going to come back where future boards are going to have to spend very limited resources on those buildings again. We can already see what's going on at the high school. The high school was, hard, very, very difficult fight over new versus rebuild, and clearly I think everybody can agree that we should have built a new high school based on the kind of money we're sinking into that building today. So that being said, This has always been part of the roadmap. This is the right thing to do for the community. I will say that it's very important. I know that the intersection is going to be addressed. I think the traffic plan is going to be decent and it's very important, I think, that from the last perspective, that traffic plan incorporates some safety on the road, and I'm sure you guys are going to deal with it. But the greater good here is really finishing the roadmap, continuing on that roadmap, getting this building in place, having a modern facility for our youth and children for the future, having Langhorne finally have an elementary school that we promised many years ago, and many of us took a lot of heat for closing in this area. So that is the commitment that was made, and I wish you all luck in this process, and Ms. Boyle, congratulations on 16 years of amazing service. Thank you for your service, and thank you for what you've done for this community.
Holly DeJoseph. Kellen Sporney.
Hi, everyone. Kellen Sporney, Langhorne resident, Region 3 here, civil engineer. I believe Monday, future school director, along with you all. So I wanted to come by. I have 2 kids at Pearl Buck right now. Obviously, I have a vested interest in the new school and schooling for our kids as much as any other parent that lives nearby here. So for 2 reasons I wanted to come by. Number 1, I just wanted to acknowledge that I'm here, that I'm listening for future, future decisions and things like that. And number 2, just to kind of go full circle for me, I believe I was here mid-February or so, February board meeting to advocate once we saw, my wife and I saw in the news that there was consideration for the elementary school on this property. I had come here first time ever to speak publicly at a school board meeting to advocate for that. Not knowing, I still don't know all the details. There's obviously, we want to minimize risk. I want to maximize, all the learning opportunities for the kids while also taking into account, all the dollars and things like that. So there's a lot to learn personally for me, but I'm very interested to, try to help carry forward the new school. It seemed like there was great strides made with Twanka in Region 1. It seems like this is a next step. And then a future step, like I believe was mentioned once or twice here, was to move to Region 2 in Levittown. So thank you very much.
Bill Watkins.
So I'm a little late to this process. I was hoping I was going to be able to have a colloquy, a discussion, but it doesn't seem like that's what's going on tonight. So I'm going to focus on Pearl Buck and Twin Oaks, okay? First, I went to Pearl Buck. I met Pearl Buck. I recall telling Pearl Buck, not me, but the people, the adults that were there, that they were so proud to have that school named after her and that they would never close her building. So it looks like this new school is happening, whether I say it doesn't or does. I hope it's named Pearl Buck. Remember that. That was a promise that was given to this woman, okay? Now, okay, so now Pearl Buck, the old Pearl Buck is sold or put in under rafters. What do we do with that property? What do we do with it? I propose we knock that building down and plant trees and create an open space. That's what we should do with that property, okay? Because it's going to negatively affect the residents of Pearl Buck. Everybody knows that people move into Twin Oaks because of the link between Twin Oaks and the kids going to Maple Point afterwards, okay? Pearl Buck, and I think it was Oliver Heckman, are the only two elementary schools that when you see the rankings of the PSSA scores match up with the Council Rock schools and the Pennsbury schools. So you're going to take those nice little environments and wreck them, and I guarantee that you're not going to be able to duplicate the environment that you're going to have in these big buildings. All right, I might be wrong, but if I'm putting money down, I'm putting on it's not going to happen. Did you think about that? Did you think about how the kids are going to respond? Yeah, it's going to look great, okay? But you buy a new car. Do you think you don't service your new car? Does the electrical problems happen 3 years down the road or a year and a half after warranty? Of course they do. So what are you going to do with the new school that you built? Let it sit there and never repair it like you did Pearl Buck? Because that's a terrible reason to close Pearl Buck if you're saying it's never been renovated before.
10 seconds.
Okay? So is there a time where I can have a chat with anybody? When? 15th? Okay, thank you.
That concludes the list. Is there anyone from the audience that would wish to approach the podium and speak at this point? Okay, hearing none. At this point, one point of housekeeping. I did mark the exhibits 1 through 9. I would just like to note that those exhibits, since the board is the hearing panel, that those exhibits be submitted and accepted into evidence. At this point, I would like also to further announce that residents and taxpayers of the school district have through, as I previously mentioned, January 3rd, 2022, to submit to the school district written testimony regarding the project. If you could put it to the attention of Jennifer Burns, Board Secretary, care of the Superintendent's Office, and also note to the attention, or note the Act 34 hearing as a reference part of the submission on the envelope, and include your name and also where you reside. I'd also like to point out that there was one submission submitted to the board this evening prior to the start of the hearing from John Curry at 4:22 this evening by email. This comment or this email will be submitted as part of the record. Since there's only one email, I will read it into the record. It says, good evening. I would like to apologize for not being able to attend tonight's meeting on the topic of the proposed new school plan. I would like to make everyone on the board aware that I am wholeheartedly against this plan for a few reasons. Slight backstory, I came to the Twin Oaks section of Levittown inside Middletown Township in 1996 at 3 years old from Philadelphia. Since then, I have had only a 5-year gap in residency in 28 years. With being a long-time, resident of the district, alumni of Pearl Buck, Maple Point Middle School, and the Neshaminy class of 2012, I have seen this district fail at even the simplest tasks of closing and repurposing schools. Currently, Oliver Heckman sits vacant since its closure in 2016. An entire neighborhood has a vacant property in it. Now the current board is wishing to close a school, leave it vacant, and build a new one. Of course, I don't disagree that Buck needs a few upgrades, but now I'm about to have a vacant building in my neighborhood for who knows how long. This is mismanagement at its finest. The board needs to think of a better solution for the renovation of Buck or for the sale of its current vacant properties before we proceed in future projects such as this. The overview I saw of the new school did not have any infrastructure updates, Now, I could be wrong about this not being included in the plan, but Maple Point creates a massive backlog of traffic in that area. A new school with an estimated 600 students in it would obviously make a terrible situation even worse. Pearl Buck is one of the nicer schools inside the district, even being outdated as it is. Maybe it's time to find the funding to bring it up to speed before leave her totally abandoned by the district. Thanks, John Curry. So again, that'll be part of the record. Mr. Piratano, I believe that we're ready to conclude the Act 34 hearing at this time. I'd like to thank the professionals for coming out, and the board, and the members of the public, and the administration for attending tonight's hearing. So with that, we can conclude the hearing.
At this point, I would like to make a motion to adjourn the Act 34 hearing. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Hollenbach. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes 9-0. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for coming out and sharing your thoughts.